Good morning, everybody. I'm Congressmember Judy Chu, and I come from California's 28th District, and I am chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, or what we call CAPAC. I'm so honored to join you and everybody on the We Are Americans commemoration of the 80th anniversary of repealing the Chinese Exclusion Act and the 125th Foundation anniversary of the Supreme Court decision on birthright citizenship. And I want to thank the 1882 Foundation, Executive Director Ted Gong, the entire 1882 Foundation team, and all of today's event partners, including United Chinese Americans, Chinese American Citizens Alliance, OCA Asian Pacific American Advocates, the Japanese American Citizens League, AARP, and of course, the Library of Congress for making this event possible. In 2010, just after I was elected to Congress, Chinese American community organizations, including many of those that are represented here today, reached out to me. We had a meeting that I will never forget. They started by saying, the Chinese Exclusion Act is amongst the most discriminatory laws ever passed by Congress. It is still the only law to name an ethnic group for exclusion from immigration and prohibited Chinese Americans from becoming naturalized citizens so that they could not vote. It required the Chinese people to carry papers on them at all times or else be subject to deportation, and only the testimony of a white person could save them. This law deprived the Chinese community in America of their civil rights for 60 long years. Yet, the U.S. has never apologized for it. Will you lead this apology from the U.S. Congress? And after I heard the passion in their voices, I said, yes. So for 2 years, we worked together to build support for a formal apology, including educating many of my colleagues in Congress, most of whom had never even heard of this law. And finally, in 2011 and 2012, the United States Senate and the House of Representatives unanimously passed my bill officially expressing regret for the Chinese Exclusion Act. This year, I am proud to announce that I will soon introduce the official congressional resolution to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the repeal of the Chinese Exclusion Act. As the first Chinese American woman ever elected to Congress, I will always use my seat at the table to ensure that our history is remembered so that nothing like this will happen to our communities ever again. Likewise, we are also gathered here to remember another turning point for our communities. In 1895, 24-year-old Wang Kim Ark returned home to San Francisco after a visit to China. He carried documents attesting to his identity and legal status as a United States citizen born on American soil. But the customs officer rejected Wang's status, asserting that because his parents weren't naturalized, he was ineligible for birthright citizenship. Citing the Chinese Exclusion Act, this officer ordered Wang to be deported. But Wang stood up for his rights, and instead, he mounted a legal challenge, all while detained on a series of steamships off the coast of San Francisco. His case eventually reached the Supreme Court, and on March 28, 1898, the Supreme Court ruled in his favor by upholding the bedrock American principle that every individual born on U.S. soil is an American citizen. So, every American over the past 125 years has benefited from Wrong's bravery. He affirmed our right as citizens and helped ensure that our nation would become a more diverse and inclusive country. But while we celebrate these milestones, we know that anti-China sentiment, rhetoric, and policymaking have been on the rise. From proposals that target and profile Chinese researchers and scientists to new alien land laws that seek to limit the property ownership rights of Chinese immigrants, U.S.-China tensions have resulted in a sharp increase in policies that harm our communities here at home. In fact, we are currently pushing back on many provisions across this country that seek to restrict land ownership for Chinese immigrant communities across various states and in Congress. These types of land laws harken back to the Chinese Exclusion Act era, or to the World War era discrimination and incarceration of Japanese Americans. And in some states like Florida, these laws are already in effect. Mr. Jiming Xu, a political asylee living in Florida, was persecuted by the Chinese government, causing him to flee to the U.S., where he has lived for the past 4 years. Because of the new Florida land law, Mr. Xu was forced to cancel the contract for the purchase of what was supposed to be his new home. As a result, he lost both his property and his $30,000 deposit. And by the end of this month, Chinese nationals who already own property will be required to register their homes and businesses. We have not seen anything as racist and discriminatory like this since the early 1900s. We cannot let history repeat itself. Our caucus, our Congressional Asian Pacific Caucus, is currently negotiating to keep these types of harmful and land ownership provisions out of all major legislation. And I recently joined Congressmember Al Green to introduce a bill, the Preemption of Real Property Discrimination Act, prohibiting such state laws from taking effect. We must learn from the Chinese Exclusion Act and other chapters in our nation's history that harmed so many people and push back against xenophobic policies that will damage our communities once again. Now we have 21 Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander members in our 118th Congress. It is the highest number in history, and our growing voice is one that will not be ignored. So as we celebrate 80 years since the repeal of the Chinese Exclusion Act and 125 years since the landmark Supreme Court decision on birthright citizenship, we must learn from history. We must look forward, and we must strengthen our voices. And as we do so, we must reach out to and stand with our allies and other communities of color who can understand the commonality of our struggles. We must lock arms and unequivocally say that we have to end these xenophobic policies and rhetoric that puts lives in danger. We were thrilled when President Biden signed into law not only the Anti-COVID Hate Crimes Act to study, and also the bill to study the National Museum of Asian Pacific American History and Culture, the first step in our effort to create our very own museum right here in Washington, D.C., so that we can teach all Americans that AAPI history is American history. So we in our Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus continue to support efforts to teach our communities' histories in schools across the nation to ensure that children learn about what happened with the Chinese Exclusion Act and that they learn from the bravery of Wong Kim Ark. So thank you again for hosting this event to recognize such important milestone anniversaries. While we look ahead to the next milestone, I look forward to continuing our work together to ensure that our communities' rights are protected. Thank you all for all of your work on behalf of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander communities across the country.